My guest today is a FID, that's PhD to you and me, therapist turned executive coach. She's spent over 25 years helping leaders move beyond micromanaging, beyond burnout, and beyond approval seeking into being grounded, secure leaders of people. She's a director of leadership development in healthcare. She's the author of The Secure Leader, and she blends psychology and coaching to help leaders rewrite their internal story and lead with more clarity, more purpose, and more presence. Welcome to the podcast, Leadership That Sells. This is a show if you are interested in leading teams as they are, because they're not. Sales teams are not really teams. They're what we call teams in parallel. They're working in a similar way, but not with each other. Most sales managers don't get this, and they're still leading like they've got a football team, when in reality what they've got is like a group of golfers. And that mismatch creates all kinds of pain, poor coaching, bad pipeline meetings, burned out managers, and reps that just drift. We built a lightweight reset that will help you and your managers lead in the right way, setting clear expectations, building identity without fluff, coaching people for autonomy without going hands off and running away. It's not training. It's a shift in the model that fits the team you've actually got. And when you do that, performance scales a lot more easily. If that sounds like it's your world, grab the free Parallel Team Playbook at the Practical Leadership Academy website. It is short, it is sharp, and it is made for senior people with teams of managers just like you. Now, on with the show. Dr. Jaime Goff, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Well, you've written a very interesting book. And you're talking about leadership patterns that come from early emotional experiences. And
Yes.
the way that those stories show up in how you lead today. Is there a particular story, is there a particular theme that you pull out that makes these things, this history that people carry with them, useful or debilitating? What goes on here?
Yeah, and I think that those themes, those patterns and stories can be both, right? Be both useful or debilitating, depending on how people are utilizing them. And I think that sometimes the emotional experiences that we have throughout our life, especially early in our lives and in childhood, quite frankly, with our caregivers, those form really deep embedded messages about who we are, our own worth as individuals, but then also about whether or not others in our lives are trustworthy, whether we can depend on them. And those patterns that we develop early on in our lives, many times they can be protective and they can be survival mechanisms. And so they serve us really, really well in certain contexts and in certain relationships. But when we take those same beliefs, patterns, stories into leadership, they can often become harmful. They can become barriers to us being the best leaders that we can be. And they can also become barriers to our team's performance as well.
Do you know, you're talking about this as a childhood follow through, and I often say that most of my leadership lessons have come from my kids,
Hmm.
and most of the ways that the challenges that I have in how you lead people, it is parenting to a greater or lesser extent. And I think if you've had a challenging childhood, I can really understand what you're saying there, how those
Hmm.
things, if you don't know how to set barriers, or you've never had barriers set, if you have a bad relationship with your father or something like that, I can
Hmm.
really see how you would struggle to coach someone forward. I mean,
Hmm.
you get the story of I live in a close and people cycle up and down here as little kids, and there's a story of the parent, not necessarily true, running behind the kid in the bike, and you say, "Oh, this is Johnny. He's a bit of a faller," in front of the kid.
Hmm.
He's a bit of a faller. That's not encouraging. You
No,
know,
yeah.
how are you supposed to build people up if you've never had somebody build you up? How are you supposed to
Hmm.
nurture someone if you've never
Exactly.
had that nurturing experience?
Hmm. And that, and then also how are you supposed to, like, if for example, if you had a childhood experience where your caregivers weren't responsive or
Mm,
accessible to you, where they didn't respond to your needs, then how are you supposed to trust people? So when it comes to leadership and delegating, right, to a team or trusting someone on your team to follow through on an important project or task, um, then you can see where that can become like micromanaging, right? Because you don't really trust that other people can do it because you've learned that you have to take care of yourself and you have to do everything yourself. So there's so many ways in which those experiences, if we're not aware of how they might be influencing us, how they can seep into other areas of our lives, including leadership.
Do you know, I often find when I work with groups of people, and I firmly believe that leadership is a learned skill set, but in the process of getting people to the point where they have access to the tools and the skills that you need, it's therapeutic to the point where you talk about you're essentially helping somebody to rewire their internal
Exactly.
barriers. You're saying,
Hmm.
okay, if you micromanage somebody, this is what happens when you do this. So what you need to do is that.
Hmm.
And coaching fundamentally is awareness.
Right.
You do this, this happens. Were you aware of that? No, okay, permissive and all that sort of stuff. But you bring awareness to a situation and say, this is what's happening. This is what you're trying to do, and this is what you're doing, and you're not. The impact is something different than you expect, and you see the light go on, and 8 out of 10 people are going, "Gosh, that happened to me. I won't do that now." And just
Hmm.
the acquiring those tools as you go is that rewire,
Hmm.
is that shift from the technical fix becoming part of this vertical state.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I've seen that so many times where, leaders or managers who are struggling and they have tools because like in my organization, for example, we have an amazing award-winning new leader onboarding program that is 6 months long, and we really equip people with some incredible tools that they can utilize around giving feedback, having difficult conversations. And we do a really good job. It's not just like we teach you and you're done. We also do a really good job of reinforcement and following up and providing some one-on-one consultation and coaching for some who are, willing to take advantage of it. But what I've seen is that there are some managers and leaders who, despite having the tool, right, the skill, we've taught them the skill, their mindset can get in the way of them utilizing that tool or that skill effectively. And so it's exactly what you said about, I think for some people who do lack self-awareness, and that really is what coaching is about, helping people come to that self-awareness, they have to rewire that mindset and change that mindset, make an adaptive change in how they think about themselves and others in the world and how they think about leadership and relationships before they can take that, step by step approach to providing effective feedback or whatever it might be.
So you've got you talk about this like a little framework for almost you call it self-discovery, right? So you have to. I always say that if you want to know how people work, first of all, look in the mirror, right?
Hmm.
If you don't know yourself, you can't work with other people.
Right.
And some of that comes through simply age, experience. But I've also worked with some young people who are very mature in their own awareness.
Hmm.
But most, I think, most folk need just a nudge. They need a bit of step work to go through
Hmm.
this. This is who I am. This is who I want to be. How do I
Yeah.
get there?
Hmm. Hmm.
So you've
Yeah.
got, I know you've got a framework for that. Talk us through that.
Yeah. 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 And in my book, I walk people through that in kind of a narrative way, really. So it's about, I focus on this idea of story and how stories become deeply embedded, in our brains, like neural pathways or
Mm.
patterns, if you will. And so I take people through a process of deconstructing their story. And so that is examining yourself, really spending some time through some guided questions and some guided exercises to understand, like, what are the stories that you're telling yourself that are driving you? what's working well for you within those stories and what are some of the patterns within those stories that are holding you back, that have become barriers. And so walking people through a process of deconstructing and examining those stories and really gaining that deep self-awareness. And then once you deconstruct your story and you have a better understanding of, oh, now I understand why I show up the way I do, why I do certain things as a leader or as a manager, then you can begin identifying, okay, what do I need to do to change this? And so I think that they're really, you know, three areas. And one is going from, becoming more emotionally regulated. So moving from dysregulation to regulation, beginning to identify and understand what your triggers are, and then how do you regulate yourself when you are triggered and what does that look like? And then the second has to do with connection, because we need to know how to connect effectively with other people and connect with people on a deeper level in an authentic way. And that also helps us to become, more secure as we connect with people, take risks in doing so, um, and experience kind of both the give and take of relationships. And then, thirdly, those two things together lead to a more holistic sense of integration in terms of your identity. So kind of bringing things together, rewriting a story for yourself in terms of how do you want to be showing up? What do you want to be known for as a leader? What does that look like? And then what are some steps for maintaining that new story moving forward?
The last piece here, this reauthoring of the narrative. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful idea. But there's always a challenge, as if it's like bringing your whole self to work. Yeah, I'll bring my whole self to work, but I'm a dick. Okay, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
reauthor my narrative to this new sense of
Mm-hmm.
self. This new,
Mm-hmm.
what is that? I don't know what that looks like. What is a good person look like? How do you identify the good? What am I aiming for?
I think barring, and I kind of talk about this a little bit in the book too, barring like really significant trauma or significant mental health issues or personality disorders, right? So kind of like setting
Health.
those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Disclaimer,
Setting
we are
those.
not.
Yeah, exactly. This is not about,
Speak to your healthcare
trauma
provider.
therapy
Yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah.
um, but kind of setting those things aside. I really do think that fundamentally, what's good, I mean that will vary a little bit, right, from one person to another. And you do want to bring some authenticity to how you show up as a leader. But I think that fundamentally, at a very basic level, good looks like truly seeing the value and worth in your own self, because you can't really treat other people as worthy and valuable and with dignity if you don't see yourself in that way. And I think that, so that's the first
Well,
part.
yes, you nailed it. I think
Yeah.
you just nailed it. Yeah, go on, go on.
And the person who's a dick, they don't value themselves,
No,
because that is a behaving in that way is usually some sort of it's a protective mechanism. They're trying to protect themselves. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is about trust. And so beginning with trust, being able to, if you see other people as having value and dignity, then you also are able to get to a place where you can trust people. You can take the risk to kind of let go, open up, hold on to things loosely, a little more loosely, whether that's in your personal relationships or in professional relationships as a leader. Learning to trust people and open up. So I really do think that at a very basic level, kind of good leadership is that seeing every single human being, including yourself, as valuable and worthy and, deserving of dignity. And second, starting from a place of trust. Now you had trust, but verify. I mean, you still want to have boundaries in place. And that doesn't mean that you never have boundaries and you don't have expectations or hold people accountable. But I really think that most people, if given, if a leader kind of lets go, most people will rise to the occasion. They just need the support to do so.
The support piece. Now I work along with a company that deals with training on high consequence environments. And part of the language you use is that people don't rise to the occasion, they fall
Mm,
to the level of their preparation. So you fall back on the skills you've learned, you fall back on the
hmm
tools and the techniques that you've picked up, where the red button is that turns the nuclear power station off when the klaxon goes, that sort of thing. And I think when you are under pressure, and my audience with the sort of the sales leadership in mind here, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people facing
hmm
constant rejection. It's a performance profession, so you're always
Right.
under scrutiny. Sales in particular is the most scrutinized, the most visible, the most measured of
Mm,
any role out there. Okay. How do you think then that internal narrative that we've got going on in
hmm
our head, this early attachment story, insecurity, unmet needs, all that sort of stuff, can you help us reframe those as maybe opportunities? How do we reframe them? How do we use
mm.
those narrative better? How do we use that better?
Yeah, I think that in those really high pressure types of environments like you're talking about, I think that people need to, and this is where I think a lot of just leaders in general get tripped up, is if you see your worth and your value only coming from meeting a sales goal
Hmm.
or, achieving, right? Um, then it's going to be really challenging for you to be in leadership, to be a good leader. And so I think in those types of environments, and I think it's everywhere. Like, I work in healthcare. So like, people are dealing with life or death decisions sometimes on a daily basis. But if your only sense of value and worth comes from achievement or from a goal or a metric, then you're always going to feel like you're falling short because none of us are always going to achieve that. We're not always going to meet that metric. Or if we do, we're leaving a lot of carnage behind us, right? In our wake.
Awake,
So
awake.
I think that in terms of that like story, and especially when it comes to that sense of worth, it's like building that and finding other things that in your life, relationships, outside of work, or even other things within your working environment that provide you with a sense of purpose and, provide you with a foundation that's not only based on achieving that goal.
Yeah,
If that,
I say quite frequently that if you, the the typical disaster promotion is the person who's best at the job getting promoted into the leadership role, right? So
hmm
the top seller, for example, being promoted to be the sales manager.
right,
And that way you've lost your top seller because they're no longer that.
right,
And you're probably about to lose half of your team because the top seller does not typically guarantee to make the top
hmm
salesperson. So there's a challenge as well, I think, around the security of the individual in that insecure individual promoted to the position of authority or leadership is about to burn themselves out and their team out,
yeah,
right? So that drives insecure leaders drive high
hmm
turnover. You don't
yes,
want high
yep,
turnover. Turnover is
absolutely,
really expensive.
hmm
You've got some exercises in your book about building up this sort of psychological safety.
hmm
What could a sales leader, sales manager do to keep those top performers working hard, build that
hmm
safe zone, but without
yeah,
being too fluffy? Because I don't know about
right, right,
healthcare, but
right, yeah.
sellers don't do fluff.
Yeah, no. And I think that when it comes to psychological safety specifically, I'll draw on the research of Amy Edmondson because
Ah,
who
yes.
else are you going to draw on, right? When you're talking about psychological safety, other than the person who really kind of started
Find it.
the research on it. Yeah. And so, she talks about psychological safety. So it's on a matrix, right? And psychological safety is one piece, but expectations are the other. And so in that top quadrant, top right quadrant of her matrix is where you have high psychological safety and high expectations. So that's when people become high performers. You have a high performing team who are meeting their goals, and they're staying because they know that if they do fail, they don't meet a goal, whatever it might be, that they're not going to be judged, criticized, punished for it. The perspective instead is, okay, we didn't meet this goal. What do we need to learn from this? What new skills do you need so that you can meet this goal in the future? What support do you need to make sure that you meet that goal in the future? Or if it's not a good fit, like how can I help connect you to a different role that might be a better fit for you, but it's in a supportive way. So, I mean, high expectations are really necessary to truly have an environment that's characterized by like really the true definition of psychological safety is not that it's just a, nice fuzzy place that you go and, um, you know, everybody's swinging in hammocks, relaxing in the sun. That's not, there are no expectations there, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think in order for when it comes to managers or leaders stepping into that role who are high performers themselves, it's a significant mindset shift that is needed for them because, and I experienced this. I remember one person that I hired onto my team who was a lot younger than me. She was a brand new grad, but oh my goodness, she was incredibly talented, very gifted person, highly skilled. And my initial feelings in relationship to her were, I hired her, but then I also felt really threatened by her.
Fear.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was, yeah, afraid that, she's going to replace me or she's going to be so amazing that, people are going to overlook me. And I really had to work on that within myself to make that mindset shift. I remember talking to my husband about it and saying, I need to shift my mindset where this is not so much about my individual performance anymore as a leader, but to help her rise. And if I help her rise, like that will reflect well on me as her leader. And so I need to let go of this fear I have that she's going to replace me or outperform me. If she does, fabulous. I brought someone incredible into this organization. I help them, thrive and flourish. And now look at all the things that they're doing for us. So that was a mindset shift I had to make because it couldn't be about me anymore. It needed to be about me helping my team be as successful as they could be.
There's a meta to that. There's the of piece,
Hmm.
which is yes, you brought somebody incredible into the organization, but you also, if this works, you helped someone start and progress in their career, and you helped them to expose their ideas to the world.
Yeah.
So that person in the world is now progressing because you
Yeah.
helped unlock and point
Hmm.
them in the right
Yeah.
direction. And that's kind of a mentorship role
Hmm.
rather than
Yeah,
lying underneath
exactly.
the insecurity and the sort of the imposterness, which is part
Hmm.
of it you're talking about
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got a text from her last week
There you go.
saying, and she doesn't work, for me anymore, but I just
That's
got a
it.
text
There
from
you
her
go.
last week that said, I still, and she's a leader. She's, and she's like, I think about the way you led me and what a huge influence that had. And it has shaped who I've become as a leader. And so, those are the things that's
Yeah.
what you like,
Yeah.
that's where you feel really good.
I'm going to give you, if you'll allow me to give you a modicum of advice on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, see, I'm asking for permission, right?
Sure, sure.
This is my learning thing. Because I'm terrible at saying, "Oh, you should do that." I said, "No, ask for permission, you arrogant sod." So I'm asking for permission, and my suggestion would be to take a screenshot of that,
Mm,
fold it up, and put it somewhere, right? Along with all the other ones that you get.
yes, yeah.
You print it out, keep it somewhere for that day when you're thinking, "Oh,
Yes.
it's right there," because you know you can do it because I've got the proof.
Yep, yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I keep all the notes and everything. So, yeah.
Portfolio.
Have a little box of
That's
them.
it. It's wonderful. Where can we
Yeah.
find you when we need you?
Yeah. So,
Dr.
my
G?
website, I'm sorry.
Dr. G?
Yeah, yeah. So my website is drjamiegoff.com and my name is Jamie, but it's spelled a little differently. So it's Jaime. You can also find me on LinkedIn and follow me there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and then Instagram as well. So yeah, any of those
Great.
platforms.
Wonderful. And the book is out?
The book is out and available. It can be found on Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to that. The Secure Leader, discover the hidden forces that shape your leadership story and how to change them. Released September 2025. There we go. Dr. Jaime Goff. If you had the biggest Sharpie in the world and an unlimited number of billboards, what would be the message you would share with all of us?
I think going along with what we've been talking about today, I think the billboard would say, leadership is becoming your best self for both you and those you lead.
Leadership is becoming your best self for you and those you lead.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought that if you do it well, it's not really altruistic. It's kind of selfish.
Oh,
If you lead
absolutely.
well, if you,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a wonderful thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Jaime Goff, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you for
Really
having me,
amazing.
Paul.
Thank you.